Welcome back. To bring you an inside look at what's happening at the state capitol this week, we turn to our On Politics panel. Dr. Jesus Chavez is superintendent of the Round Rock Independent School District. He's served in that same capacity in Harlingen and in Corpus Christi. Peggy Venable is the Texas Director of Americans for Prosperity. She's also served in the U.S. Department of Education. Ken Zerfaris is the co-president of Education Austin, the labor union for Austin ISD employees. And Laura Heinauer is the education reporter and blogger at the Austin American Statesman. Welcome to all of you. Dr. Chavez, we've seen budget-cutting ideas in Round Rock, ranging from delaying school openings to raising student-teacher ratios, so forth. What do you think this will have on the academic achievement for students in Round Rock?
You know, I've been asked that question before with regards to whether the cuts are going to impact the quality, and most definitely it's going to impact the quality. Here, when you talk about the kind of cuts that we're talking about, it's going to impact all areas of our district, all departments, all different budgets, including some cuts to schools as well.
Ms. Venable, you've been vocal about the one-to-one argument. Maybe you can explain what that is, and I'm hearing that you're thinking that we spend too much on education.
I don't know that we spend too much on education. I think we don't spend our education dollars wisely. We have one non-teaching staff for every teacher across the state of Texas. We definitely are spending too little on instruction. We spend about 50 cents out of every education dollar on instruction. We believe that we can cut education spending without cutting education, without cutting in the classroom, and that's what we should look to do.
Mr. Serafis, personnel, about 85% of a school district's budget. One of the budget-cutting proposals on the table right now is making it easier for superintendents to hire and fire teachers. What would be the response from Education Austin on this?
Well, I was down at the Senate subcommittee hearings just a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that superintendents across the district were asking for was a lot more power and being able to control certain levers within the district. And I can certainly understand their perspective in controlling the district. However, most of what was being talked down there was how superintendents could have greater power, while what our concern is the elimination of power that the teachers have within the classroom and on their campuses, and the protections that they have. It's understandable there's a balance that has to occur, you know, with superintendents being able to run a district, yet teachers being protected within that district. And I want to see it with any kind of changes that teachers are protected and that they're right, they still have their rights.
Ms. Heinauer, in covering the education beat at the Capitol, what's the headline from this past week?
I think it was definitely, I think in Austin particularly, it was the partnership that Austin is now looking at going to enter with, possibly with the city, to look for ways to save money. That was a very interesting development, and I think that was probably the headline from this past week.
Dr. Chavez, where do you see this heading in terms of, well, you're dealing with cuts and so forth. Where's it going to end up?
Well, my hope is that they do find some additional resources to put back into education. Keep in mind that when you talk about the worst case numbers that we have seen, for Round Rock, it's about a 22% cut. Now, you know, you're starting to hear some support for use of part of the rainy day fund. They shouldn't use all of it, but they should use a portion of it. You know, I was also very happy to hear Senator Ogden, when he first spoke to the Senate, talk about the need to reform the franchise tax. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, they ought to go and do it all over again, but if there are some refinements that provide additional resources, they ought to do that as well.
Looking big picture, we see that private schools generally operate more leaner and meaner and more efficient in many respects. Could we see a day where vouchers would be used for Texans? Are you in favor of that?
I think certainly parents should have the opportunity to direct their children's education. And you're right, public schools are much more expensive per pupil in operating than our private schools. Some would say it has to do with a lot of the mandates that the legislature has placed on them. And for that, I think the answer is let's look at those mandates, let's go down those mandates, let's cut those mandates that are costing more money and are causing us to have to spend more money outside the classroom.
Mr. Zerafis, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I think that I would argue that if you look at private schools and charters, I think we could argue that just the other side of that is that they're no more efficient than public schools. They're no more successful. If you really dig down deep, now you can take a certain section and say that these are more successful, but we could also, if you look at all across the country, you're going to see that public school is still providing an excellent model for education and providing it for everybody and not being exclusive. We are just huge proponents of public education.
What kind of mandates would you like to see go away?
Well, and we talked a little bit about the Chapter 21, which, deal with teacher contracts, but there are others as well. We've got a requirement, and we do support remediation, but should the state be telling us that it ought to be a 10-to-1 ratio? What's wrong with 12? What's wrong with 15? So there are a number of things I think that the state could do to help us save some dollars by taking away some of the mandates.
Laura, the political dynamics going on around education, the R's and the D's, where do you see this heading?
I think it's really difficult to tell right now. I mean, there's so much uncertainty as to how this budget is going to unfold and how districts are going to be impacted individually. Austin's looking at anywhere between a $94 and $184 million shortfall, depending on how the school finance law gets rewritten. And so it's really, I think, difficult to tell, but I think that districts are going to be trying to show that they're very serious about making cuts, and lawmakers are going to be trying to make sure that they see cuts other than, changes to laws that they want to see. But they're definitely going to be looking at those kind of cuts.
We see people protesting these cuts. We talked about how does that impact you, number one, the protesters that come to the meetings?
Well, actually, in our community, we've been very good about putting a lot of information on the website. We actually have a special tool that we've put on there for the community to help us think about what areas ought to be cut. Mm-hmm. You literally can go check off. It has a little calculator to give you the amount. We have received a lot of input from our community and want to continue to do so as we balance our budget. We really haven't had the protests per se, although I know our community is concerned. I do think, though, the numbers will get better as the session moves along. I was happy to hear the Commissioner of Education say that he'd like to restore about $6 billion back into the foundation school program. Educators, teachers, given time, deliver on the improvement for students, and so that's what we really need to focus on. What is it that we're going to do to continue to improve, particularly with the new accountability system coming?
Well, this morning our On Politics panel poll is asking the question, to save money, should school districts offer incentives for teachers to retire early? We'll find out what you have to say about that coming up here on KXAN. Plus, our On Politics panel fields your online chat this morning. Keep it here for Session 11.